The very last thing that we're going to look at for your revision and for the planning of effective revision is how to stay fit enough for it. And this is something that a lot of students underestimate, but those who get it right reap the benefits. And this can apply at all levels. Think of yourselves as athletes in training. That's the best kind of metaphor for you when you're thinking about your revision plans. So athletes in training need to consider the quality and the quantity of their training. So they're not just doing loads and loads, they're also thinking about how high quality it is, whether what they're doing is actually useful. And that relates back to the previous videos that we've looked at. Athletes also need to plan strenuous exercise and strenuous training as well as recovery time, otherwise they burn out. So that balance is kept very, very carefully. They also need to plan their training around the requirements of the competition. Just like you guys, you're doing an exam, don't do loads and loads of work that isn't going to directly benefit you during the exam. Athletes also keep a balance between capitalizing on their strengths but also mitigating their weaknesses. If you know that there are certain areas of your revision that you're not good at or certain topics that you're weak at, then do your best to get those sorted first. In fact, start with them. You know the old saying, if you have to swallow a frog, swallow it whole. If you have to swallow two frogs, swallow the big frog first. I don't know who says that, but it sounds like a really silly thing to do, so it must be very wise. And finally, you need to have a very high level of awareness of how you are reacting to what your training is involving. So you need to think about your recovery times, you need to think about the amount of effort that you're putting in, and you need to be aware when you're not doing enough and when you're doing too much, because that's the best way to optimize your performance. So how do you get yourselves into training for these exams and get yourself ready? It probably involves a good 3 to 4 months of getting yourself ready. If you think athletes, it's probably about 18 months before an Olympic competition. So you need to think about that long term, and there are going to be some deprivations that you're going to have to suffer, I'm afraid. During the time that you're in training, get your sleep. 8 hours a night, 9 hours, however many you function well on. If you know your sleep cycle, then get yourself a good 2 cycles of sleep every night. Early to bed if you can. And the other important thing is get yourself away from work for at least an hour before you go to sleep. Otherwise your mind's going to be buzzing. In fact, doing work late at night is not a particularly good idea. Number 2, make sure you take breaks between your revision sessions. Your brain needs that recovery time, just as an athlete needs physical recovery time. So make sure that you have good, solid breaks and that you don't do anything during them. Number 2, time off is really important. So plan it into your schedule. Have something to look forward to. If you're doing 7 days worth of revision, or you're planning a week's worth of revision, make sure you've got one whole day off. Give yourself something to really look forward to that you've earned during that day, and give yourself smaller chunks of time off during the week as well. Hydration is one of those things that people often overlook, but a 10% drop in your body's hydration level can have a serious impact on your brain function. So while you don't need to overdo water all the time, make sure that you stay hydrated. Eat well, that seems sort of self-evident, but you need to think about what you're eating for. You're training for a marathon. You are going to be doing a lot of hard work for the next 3 or 4 months, and you need to eat appropriately. So that involves slow release, complex carbohydrates, lots of vitamins, lots of minerals, vegetables, lots of brain food. Unfortunately, it means laying off the junk food. All those processed carbs, high sugar, high salt, caffeine, etc., they're all stimulants and they give a quick burst of energy, and unfortunately they make your brain feel nice for a while, but then they make you crash straight afterwards. They are absolutely no use to you whatsoever, especially just before the exam. And last but not least, physical exercise. Your brain needs oxygen to think effectively. Your lungs are kind of like the taxi that's taking it there. So make sure that you do plenty of physical exercise. If you can do some every single day, good. Sharp brain and a fit body go hand in hand. And the other thing to say about physical exercise is it's also an excellent way to get rid of any stress or frustration from the revision that you've been doing and to work it off.